hard. You see, if I can be happy, whether this occurs or the opposite occurs, I care less about which way it turns out. But right now, we're all brought up in a world where we have these good things, we have these bad things. You've got to kill yourself to get the good things, step over wherever you can to avoid the bad things. Once you recognize that's all in your head, just be still. My favorite example, this was for me, was so funny. I'm doing one of these podcasts over Zoom, and I'm trying to explain that evaluation is in your head, not in the things you're evaluating. I say, as an example, so if the internet went out right now, it wouldn't be terrible. I'd go have lunch. The internet went out just at that moment, and I did have lunch because I had put the suggestion in my mind. Most things don't matter. We don't recognize that, and I think I have a few one-liners that if people understand or care about nothing else that I've said, take this to heart. That next time you're stressed, ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? It's almost never a tragedy. And so you breathe, so I failed the test, I got, dented the car, I missed the bus, whatever it is, so what? And so you take a deep breath and come back to yourself and realize that most of the things that make us crazed are unnecessary. You get a lot of this as you get older, but I teach my students this early on. Why wait? Why wait to recognize that you're the one who's almost always your worst enemy?
Oh, yeah. I'd like to take a quick break and thank our sponsor, AG1. AG1 is an all-in-one vitamin mineral probiotic drink with adaptogens. I've been taking AG1 daily since 2012, so I'm delighted that they're sponsoring this podcast. The reason I started taking AG1 and the reason I still take AG1 is because it is the highest quality and most complete foundational nutritional supplement. What that means is that AG1 ensures that you're getting all the necessary vitamins, minerals, and other micronutrients to form a strong foundation for your daily health. AG1 also has probiotics and prebiotics that support a healthy gut microbiome. Your gut microbiome consists of trillions of microorganisms that line your digestive tract and impact things such as your immune system status, your metabolic health, your hormone health, and much more. So I've consistently found that when I take AG1 daily, my digestion is improved, my immune system is more robust, and my mood and mental focus are at their best. In fact, if I could take just one supplement, that supplement would be AG1. If you'd like to try AG1, you can go to drinkag1.com/Huberman to claim a special offer. They'll give you 5 free travel packs plus a year's supply of vitamin D3K2 with your order of AG1. Again, go to drinkag1.com/Huberman to claim this special offer. Today's episode is also brought to us by Joovv. Joovv makes medical-grade red light therapy devices. Now, there's one thing that I've consistently emphasized on this podcast. It is the incredible impact that light can have on our biology. Now, in addition to sunlight, red light and near-infrared light sources have been shown to have positive effects on improving numerous aspects of cellular and organ health, including faster muscle recovery, improved skin health and wound healing, improvements in acne, reduced pain and inflammation, even mitochondrial function, and improving vision itself. What sets Joovv lights apart and why they're my preferred red light therapy device is that they use clinically proven wavelengths, meaning specific wavelengths of red light and near-infrared light in combination to trigger the optimal cellular adaptations. Personally, I use the Joovv whole body panel about 3 to 4 times a week, and I use the Joovv handheld light both at home and when I travel. If you'd like to try Joovv, you can go to Joovv, spelled JOOVV.com/Huberman. Joovv is offering an exclusive discount to all Huberman Lab listeners with up to $400 off Joovv products. Again, that's Joovv, spelled JOOVV.com/Huberman to get up to $400 off. So much of our developmental wiring is based on learning how to predict what's going to happen next. I mean, think about object constancy that kids, of a certain age, you put a ball behind your back, they think it disappeared. Eventually they realize just because you moved your arm and the ball behind your back doesn't mean that the ball is gone. This kind of thing.
Sadly, though, then they believe the ball is still there, when in fact the ball may be gone.
True, right. Okay, so there's always a portal to a different outcome, and I'm catching on to your mode of thinking here. This is actually what I'm trying to do, because I think the brain is a prediction making machine. In addition to doing other things, it regulates heartbeat, all the autonomic stuff, right? Heartbeat, digestion, etc. It remembers things, and it's a prediction making machine. At least those 3 things. I feel like the prediction making aspect of our neural circuitry is what leads us to this notion of having control or wanting control, because I think a lot of what's happening in our conversation in the backdrop of these experiments is to what extent do we have control over outcomes?
Well, it's interesting because our mindlessness, which results, I think, in part to hold on to things, to have control, is the very thing that deprives us of control. Because again, things are changing. You're holding it still in your mind, so you're living with somebody, or you meet somebody, and you right away you decide what size that person up. So now you can control your interactions with them, but what you're doing is ignoring all the times the person is not like that. All the ways that the relationship could have otherwise grown. that we, in general, and this is, I have a psychological treatment for chronic illness. It's all based on the same idea of change. Things are changing. We're always holding it still. And so you have the illusion that you're controlling things. But in fact, you're giving up control by not recognizing for yourself or somebody else. All of our statements, we can do, or we can do. You can't know whether you can or you can't. The fact that you did it doesn't mean that you can do it again. The fact that you couldn't do it doesn't mean you couldn't do it in the future.
I feel like close to the end of each year, which we just passed recently, these lists come out.
Oh, these resolutions are so mindless, but they're more than just mindless. They deny that what we did made sense, or else we wouldn't have done it. That one thing that I told you is more important to me than anything else that I came to over all these years of study. So you're going to resolve that you're going to, stop drinking, you're going to go to the gym, whatever these New Year's resolutions are, suggests that what you were doing instead of that thing you think you should be doing was not something you should have been doing. And I think that's never the case.
I woke up early this morning, and my first thoughts of the day, I like to think have some importance for something. Who knows? It's when in my mind it seems clearest for at least a nanosecond. And my first thought was that the pattern that I seem to be perpetually in is one of whatever I'm doing, unless I'm podcasting or reading a research paper, that my mind is constantly flitting to the other things that I think I should be doing.
Yeah,
and it's very sad, and it's something I've been working on for a very long time. And I'm able to hold my, for lack of a better word, attention on things to accomplish tasks, and, in my life, and to be present with people, as it were. But I thought...
No, let's go back a step, because we both said it was sad. Why is it sad? I'm reconsidering.
Well,
that to be able to think of 5 different things instead of one,
it's dreadful.
Could be an asset.
It could be an asset. I think that for me, what I realize is most of the shoulds are just total lies.
Yeah.
They don't, and also they don't. They're just lies. Like they're not actually coming from a script. I'm not hearing other people's voices in my head. You should do this. It's not parental narrative or anything. It's just contamination of a useless type. It's not like listening to the radio. I used to listen to the radio while I was making dinner or something. It was so pleasant, right? Hear discussion about the news or talk show on the radio while cooking, and so that kind of
I'm on early. I'm doing my daily mission.
I felt like but I lived alone, that I had other people in the room with me. This is different. It feels as if it detracts from some essence of the behavior that I'm in, even if the behavior is just getting out of bed.
Wait, so
you went to sleep so
you get out of
fucking
bed,
late.
or start to get out of bed, and you have several thoughts.
Check the time.
And those thoughts bother you? Or they prevent you from getting out of bed?
You need to be
No, but
sleeping
they
early.
feel intrusive. They don't feel welcome. Because I know what I'm going to do each day. I have
You
a
woke
policy
up?
for myself of
Okay.
doing one work thing each day, maybe in 1 or 2 blocks, and I try and really put everything I have into those. It's kind of a recent evolution of not trying to do 3 things in a day. Maybe it's a function of getting older, but I get so much more satisfaction and get truly so much more done from just doing one thing in my
I
work
don't even
life each day.
understand the one thing idea. That people talk about multitasking, which is what you're saying, and you're better not to multitask, but you're always multitasking, right? I mean, I'm moving my hands while I'm talking to you, and I'm sort of thinking and, fixing my back in the seat. There are always lots of things going on. And I
really?
think that
Okay,
also
I didn't know
tasks, so let's say you're a kid, and you're doing your social studies homework.
Usually a night's
And
sleep makes you
then
feel
you're
better.
doing
At least
your
I feel
math
better
homework.
after.
And so,
night's
and you go
sleep.
back and forth. So are you multitasking? It depends. If you see yourself as multitasking, then you're drawing boundaries between your math and your social studies. If you see yourself as doing homework, it's all part of the same thing. And so there's always a way that the tasks can be grouped as a single unit, or you can see anything as multitasking. When you see it as multitasking, you're suggesting to yourself that there's going to be some conflict. There's some reason I'm leaving this to go to this.
Well, maybe I'm running the script backwards.
Passed out. Okay.
Let me put it differently. The level of satisfaction that I feel from having, say, worked on a chapter of my book for a couple of hours or even 45
Well,
minutes.
yeah, if you're
or
that
from
tired, you
going
should
for a
just
run
be
without my
sleeping.
phone and just enjoying the run, it still blows me away how much I enjoy
I think
things
usually if I don't feel great,
that would
if
fall
I
under
go
the
to
category
sleep,
of
I
simple
usually
things
recover,
or
'cause I
things
think
that I
mostly
experience in
everyone needs-
isolation.
Yeah.
As compared to how little
Bedtime's
I
rest.
enjoy and sometimes reflect on how punishing quote-unquote multitasking is, like
it
being
depends
in a
on-
text conversation while I'm walking on the beach.
No, but when you're texting while you're on the beach, probably it's some kind of work text, right? There's something about it, and why you're doing it when you're on the beach. It's not because I can easily imagine, I'm on the beach, it's wonderful. Let me text Andrew and say, Andrew, you're right. This time on the beach is wonderful, and texting wouldn't take away from it. My life is much simpler. To me, all you have are moments. That's it. And if you make the moment matter, then the moment matters, and you can't make it matter more. It matters or it doesn't matter. And so the question, when you're lost doing, or found really, I don't want to say lost when we're writing. I find myself when I'm writing.
Well, yeah.
But when you're, engaged in an activity,
I don't know if you work too hard in
you're
your
making
job.
each of those moments matter. But, they should matter as much.
Okay.
I had this thought that I would help people who are stressed. And I would say to them, okay, so assuming that their vision is reasonable, I would just thread a needle. Threading the needle. And then I'd ask them how they felt. And everybody's going to feel fine because you're actively engaged and doing something. You're not engaged in what people call monkey brain or whatever, worrying about tomorrow, worrying about, so on. So to go back to your three things, it's like the text on the beach is not an I love you text. Because I don't see why that would distract you. I could imagine being anywhere doing multiple things where I'm sharing what I'm doing, but I'm not seeing them, I have to do this work thing. And then the question is, why see the work thing that way? And especially someone like you, where you don't need any of this anymore anyway.
Well, yeah, that's a discussion unto itself.
But it's important,
it's true. Yeah.
and so that if it's all fun,
That-
it doesn't
that
matter.
freaking- I think
I
the
was on this
teammates were
panel
very
in
good.
Australia. Well, first, each of us gave a talk, some big shots. And then, unbeknownst to us, they brought
Yeah,
us
it's not-
all out.
I
And
didn't
we're
really
sitting there. And
know much
I'm
about
the last one
Cinderella
to be asked.
until
And the question
Pokemon
was,
Unite.
what's on your bucket list? And so the
Didn't
first
think
person
about
answers
it.
what's on the next person, and we get 5. Now it's my turn, so I've had some time to think about this. My first thought, I don't have a bucket list. But of course, you know that I'm going to say, well, it's good not to have a bucket list, or else I'd have a bucket list. So then I'm able to say why I don't have a bucket list. If you imagine you're like a glass, and the water is full, or whatever, vodka in this case, that it's full, you can't do more than that. And so, if the moment is meaningful, you don't have to be writing that book, being in love, on a vacation in Paris.
No, sure.
And so I think we have all these crazy notions. Even the idea of, I've talked about this before, work-life balance. Ooh, that's scary to me. What that says, what life really means is some joy, right? Other than just being, doing work 24/7 or however long people work, not 24/7. What is it? 3.5 hours. Anyway, that
Bye.
it suggests that the work that we're doing has to be aversive. And because it's aversive, the only way to have a good life is to add this fun time. And I think that's sad. I think it's sad that people think life has to be stressful, that work has to be unpleasant. That no matter what you're doing, I believe there's a way of doing it so that
Contemplate,
it's
like-
fun.
Well, I love that notion. I mean, I will routinely these articles just get served up to me in my Google feed or something. Like the 5 things that people regret most on their deathbed. I think these lists are terrible.
I do too.
I think they're terrible because without fail, the number 1, 2, or 3 is always, I wish I hadn't worked as much.
Yeah.
I've derived tremendous
Me too.
pleasure from
Me
my
too.
work, but also tremendous relationships, tremendous
Sure.
levels of insight into what I think are insights
Well,
anyway.
clear, you wouldn't be having the experience now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm constantly in pinch me moments
Yeah.
with the podcast.
Yeah.
That was also true when I was running my lab, and then I decided to transition more to this and to other things. But I mean, this notion that one wishes they'd worked less,
Yeah.
it's such a sad thing to even think about. But it also implies that, somebody who enjoys their work doesn't enjoy their family or their relationships,
Right.
and that certainly isn't
Yeah.
true either. So there are all these assumptions that are written into these lists. I'm actually quite opposed to lists of that sort in a short media article form because I think, it clearly doesn't change behavior.
Right.
I mean, people have been talking about, drink less. Well, smoking was eradicated mostly from this country through different mechanisms, but sleep more, stress less. I mean, these lists come out and they don't change behavior at all.
Not only that, but even a discussion about, let's say, something like sleep. I find it outrageous. We might even disagree on this here, but when people say how much sleep you need. Now, to me, if I just ran a marathon, that night, I probably need a different amount of sleep than if I stayed in bed eating candy, watching movies all day. My age, everything should play a part in this.
If I relax in the 2 or 3 hours before going to sleep,
that's it.
Especially if I dim the lights,
Yeah.
I actually require a full 2 to 3 hours less of sleep to wake up feeling refreshed.
Yeah.
My criteria is what does it take to wake up feeling reasonably refreshed?
So to go back to the mind-body unity studies, we have a study where we have people in a sleep lab. They wake up and the clock tells them they got 2 hours more sleep than they actually got, 2 hours fewer, or the amount of sleep they got. Biological and cognitive functioning follow perceived amount of sleep.
Yeah, this is such an important study. I was going to bring it up later, but I'm so glad you brought it up now. These days, a tremendous number of people are tracking their sleep. I do it through my 8 Sleep mattress cover. I love getting my sleep score. I like to see what I got. People do it with the Oura Ring or the Whoop Band, or pick your favorite technology nowadays, or Apple Watch, whatever. If I understand this study correctly, the perception of how much sleep people got based on their knowledge of a number, a score, etc., dictates their cognitive performance and their physical well-being.
Yeah.
This runs countercurrent to everything in the wellness biohacking movement. It jibes, however, with the data that I'm aware of. I think it was a sleep lab at Stanford that, for instance, positive anticipation of next day events reduces your sleep need and improves the quality of your sleep. Just being excited for the next day can make it such that the 5 hours you got is sufficient.
The funniest thing is that if you have to wake up early in the morning to make a flight, okay, so you have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to make a flight, what most people will do is go to sleep early the night before so they can wake up early. But they're not going to be able to fall asleep because the amount of sleep they need is dictated by the day before, not the day to come.
Well, I do think that there was a "I'll sleep when I'm dead" mindset that was diminishing people's health for a while. I do think it's great that books like Matt Walker's, Why We Sleep, etc., came out. Although that book focused more on the bad things that happen if you don't sleep enough. And I think Matt, who's done a series on here about sleep, would now say, it's great that we're now focused largely on the things that one can do to get agency over one's sleep. But I think that there's such a thing as creating a sleep need anxiety, and then people
can't sleep.
we're not going to dissolve into a puddle of our own tears
Yeah.
on one poor night's sleep.
Yeah, no,
Right.
but it's also that if you're not sleeping, what is the reason for that? And if you're stressed, obviously it's the stress that's the problem, not the number of hours sleep you're getting.
Well, I always say if you're going to get less than your typical or required night's sleep, hopefully it's for good reasons. Hopefully you're having a good time. It's when you get a fire alarm in the middle of the night that it becomes, as you said, stressful. I'd like to just briefly go back to the counterclockwise study.
Yeah.
Could you describe a little bit more about the practical aspects of that study? So these were people who, let's say, were on average how old? Was it somewhere between 30 and 50?
No. Counterclockwise, no, these were people who were 80.
Oh, 80. Okay,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Yeah, but also that was when 80 was 80, not the new 60. They were old. In fact, I remember when I was interviewing people to see if they could be in the study. So they're down the hall, I'm in my office, and I see them, and they look like they're not going to make it down the hall to the office. And I'm saying to myself, why am I doing this? That I'm taking on too much. In fact, had I realized all the responsibility at that point that I was actually assuming, I probably wouldn't have done it. I mean, I was in charge of these people's lives, everything about them, for this 5 days without knowing these people, without a full medical, support
Yeah, if
system.
one or two of
whatever.
them had died, you could end up in a mess.
Yeah. So I was fortunate that none of that happened. But so they were old. It was interesting because, they show up and they look, really, now it'd probably be somebody 105.
Wow.
That's the way they, presented. And you'd speak to the person, and usually the adult daughter would do the answering rather than, so they were coddled, they were presumed to have all sorts of problems and so on. Almost instantly when they got there, they changed. The feeling was almost palpable. Now, I did this thing. It wasn't good science, but so the first group that we took there was the reminiscent group. This was a group where they were going to reminisce for that week. So they always knew now was now and then was then, right? That was a control group. We get to the retreat, and I'm in this van. Oh, people need to understand the study was back before Google, before we had the internet. So when I am playing music in the van going to the event, music from the past. This was a major thing to find this. Now it takes 2 minutes. You ask Shad lately, give me the 10 best songs back 20 years ago. At any rate, so I'm on the bus with them, music playing from the past playing. We get very close to the retreat, and all of a sudden I realize that I was sexist at the time, oblivious. that none of my male graduate students were with me. That meant I had 7 old men and at least 7 heavy suitcases. There was no way that I was going to carry their suitcases upstairs. So, unplanned for, we get off the bus, and I say, you're in charge of your own suitcase. I don't care if you move it an inch at a time to get it to your room, or you unpack it here, a shirt at a time, however you want to do it. Now imagine, nothing else, the difference between somebody who's cuddled, who's not even thought to be able to respond to a question, where the daughter or son would answer for them, to now, they're in charge of their whole lives. And that meant that even the comparison group was going to do well, which they did, just not quite as well as the other group. And for me, that was fine because, as you mentioned before, my work is all about possibility. I'm not interested in describing what is. I'm interested in seeing what may be. So if I got one monkey to say, hey, Ellen, that's nonsense, that would be fine if we couldn't train the rest of them, but it would lead us to different views of language.
I love this approach to science of seeing what may be. I have to say, there's this little script running in the back of my mind, and now I'm not going to judge it. The sorts of experiments and the general line of inquiry that you've been involved in for, some time now, to me runs countercurrent to my perception of, I'm just going to be honest because I'm a West Coast guy, the Harvard campus and the idea that science is done in a particular way. A very brief anecdote, the folks that founded at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur were at Stanford at one point. They weren't professors, but there's a story, and I believe the story, that they had proposed at that time a class on mindfulness and breathing to bring Stan Graf through and some other people. And this was probably the late 70s, early 80s, and whatever the cultural norms were at Stanford at that time, they claimed they were basically run off campus, went and started Esalen. I don't know if it's a true story, but I like the story anyway. My lab at Stanford ran a study on particular patterns of breathing along with David Spiegel and how it can be used to, self-adjust stress levels and reduce stress levels. Okay, so nowadays there's grants given for this kind of stuff and meditation. So there's been a huge shift in the academic cultural milieu. But given that you've been running these sorts of, seeing what may be types of studies for a number of years at a campus that I consider as more kind of like East Coast dyed-in-the-wool notions of how science is done, I want to know, A, how was it received early on? B, did you care? C, is it in your nature and has it always been in your nature to kind of test the elements? Because I sense, but I could be completely wrong because I'm not a psychologist, that you delight in kind of not poking the bear, but playing with ideas that are kind of heretical.
Well, I would use the methods of the field. It was just the questions that were different. So they weren't seen to be quite as different as you're suggesting.
Did any of your colleagues think like
no.
Great. Okay.
No.
I love hearing that because it shatters my notions of kind of East Coast Ivy League academia.
I mean, perhaps behind my back, but...
Well, clearly it's worked out. And nowadays, there are multiple labs at Harvard working on happiness, working on mindfulness. And I mean, you've pioneered an entire field in a way. But I'm more interested in the way of thinking that was the...
Well, so it's interesting.
The 8-year-old Ellen Langer, maybe cookies are the nutritious stuff.
I understand. So I seem to be, come hell or high water, I'm going to do it. I'm not like that at all.
Interesting.
More now that I'm older. But I tell a story, I don't remember what the point of it, the exact point was, in the Mindful Body, where I'm at the dentist. I'm a little kid. I don't remember how old. And I remember my mother came in, and the dentist told my mother what a good patient I was. And all I remember was my saying, what were the other kids doing? So it wasn't as if I made a choice. I could do this or I could do, it never occurred to me. And so lots of these ideas, are not against or what, I don't know where they come from. I know Lee Ross when, so Lee was a professor at Stanford. And I remember having a conversation where he said, Ellen, you're from Mars. And I said, I'm not so different. He says, okay, so you're a normal, not an exceptional Martian, but you're still a Martian. And then a colleague had a conversation with, and I was flattered by this, but I think it wasn't meant to be flattering because they were worried what my reaction was that, I'm from a different time. And so that plays differently if you're aware. So like when I started painting, I was breaking the rules to some people's minds, but no, I didn't know the rule. And so I was just doing what felt natural.
Well, I have to introduce you to my good friend, Rick Rubin, who's been on this podcast a few times because he wrote The Creative Act. He's basically, his life has been spent, trying to pull out the best creative works from musicians. And he's been involved in other things too. And he just has a kind of supernatural level of ability to do this. And he keeps coming back to this thing in our discussions, but also in his book and elsewhere about how the the greatest impediment to the creative process is to think about the publicity or cultural milieu that it's going to exist in. That he really believes that these things are offerings to God, to the universe, to whatever, that come through us, and that the barrier is it's almost like the self-awareness is the barrier.
So one of the earlier titles of The Mindful Body was Who Says So?
Love it.
And, realizing that everything that is was at one point a decision made by people with different motives, different histories, different needs. When you put people, as I say, back in the equation, everything becomes mutable. Everything. So there are things, here's where I am different from many other people, for better or worse. I think in this case for better, that everything can be changed. You tell me you meet this woman and she's too heavy, weight can be lost, hair can be ruined, everything can be changed. So I give a talk when I was very young, and I'm here on the stage, and the audience is all the way back here. And I knew that was going to make me nervous. So what I did was move all the chairs to be closer to me. Now, if you said to anybody, can you move the chairs? Everybody would say, of course. But mindlessly, it doesn't occur to you. It doesn't occur to you that what is doesn't have to be as it is. And the older I get, the more malleable everything seems to be. Even a thing, to go back, I don't know why this comes to mind, but it does. If an insurance company is making a decision about what drugs to insure. Now, who said that this disorder is better or more worthy than that disorder? I say, so these are people making this decision. So imagine that you have a group of nuns, they're the committee making the decision, versus a group of lusty 50-year-old men. And they're deciding whether people should be reimbursed for Viagra, for example. And that's what it's all about. That when you recognize that whatever is could be different as meetings, and I deal with this when I give lectures. At some point I might say, look in the audience and see if there's usually a man. Is there a man here? It's about 6'5". Somebody always there. I don't know why. 6'5" men find me attractive. I don't know why. Anyway, I invite him to the stage, and then we look ridiculous. I'm 5'3", he's 6'5". And I ask him to put his hand up. He puts his hand up. His hand is 3 inches larger than mine. And then I just raise the question, should we do anything physical the same? And it's ridiculous. But one of us is teaching how to do it. So the more different you are from the person who wrote the rule, the more important it is for you not to mindlessly follow the rule. So you don't hold the tennis racket like this if your hand is half the size of the person or twice the size, or anything else. And people don't realize it. That everything that was a decision. For something to be a decision means there was uncertainty. As soon as the decision is made, we forget all that uncertainty and act as if this is the way it's supposed to be. An example I often use, tennis. So you have, and everybody, when you think about this, and nobody's going to argue that, of course, the rules to tennis weren't handed down from the heavens. Somebody decided it should be 2 serves, and that's fine. But for me, 3 serves would be better. The first time I kill it, doesn't go in. Now I'm afraid to try to kill it again and learn from that because I don't want to double fault. So I have a little wuss second serve. I have 3 serves, I kill it, it doesn't go in. Now I learn from that, I kill it again, but I'm getting a little better, and I still have my backup 3rd serve. All right, so what is the point of that? That if I wrote the rules to the game, I would be a better tennis player. You would be better at whatever you're writing the rules to. So you think differently about yourself. You don't feel bad about it. In fact, when people play tennis with me, we often play 3 serves. Why not? Everything about it is up for grabs. And, so what happens is the lower down you are on the totem pole, the fewer of these things, games, ways of being that you yourself have created, the more you're trying to fit yourself into some form that isn't so comfortable. So we need to appreciate that rules, laws, everything was just somebody's decision about how things should be. And don't violate them purposely, but if they don't fit, legality is not the same thing as morality. By law, one was not allowed interracial marriage. By law, one was not allowed to be gay. By law, so on and so forth. One wasn't allowed to drink at one point, and so on. These are not moral issues. These are a group of people who are making a decision for the rest of us. If it doesn't hurt, fine. But, if it does, fight it, deviate, at least live the life you want to live.
I'd like to take a quick break and acknowledge one of our sponsors, Function. Last year, I became a Function member after searching for the most comprehensive approach to lab testing. Function provides over 100 advanced lab tests that give you a key snapshot of your entire bodily health. This snapshot offers you with insights on your heart health, hormone health, immune functioning, nutrient levels, and much more. They've also recently added tests for toxins such as BPA exposure from harmful plastics and tests for PFASs or forever chemicals. Function not only provides testing of over 100 biomarkers key to your physical and mental health, but it also analyzes these results and provides insights from top doctors who are expert in the relevant areas. For example, in one of my first tests with Function, I learned that I had elevated levels of mercury in my blood. Function not only helped me detect that, but offered insights into how best to reduce my mercury levels, which included limiting my tuna consumption. I'd been eating a lot of tuna, while also making an effort to eat more leafy greens and supplementing with NAC and acetylcysteine, both of which can support glutathione production and detoxification. And I should say, by taking a second Function test, that approach worked. Comprehensive blood testing is vitally important. There's so many things related to your mental and physical health that can only be detected in a blood test. The problem is blood testing has always been very expensive and complicated. In contrast, I've been super impressed by Function's simplicity and at the level of cost. It is very affordable. As a consequence, I decided to join their scientific advisory board, and I'm thrilled that they're sponsoring the podcast. If you'd like to try Function, you can go to functionhealth.com/Huberman. Function currently has a wait list of over 250,000 people, but they're offering early access to Huberman podcast listeners. Again, that's functionhealth.com/Huberman to get early access to Function. I feel like one of the major detriments to living the way that you're describing, which, by the way, has tremendous gravitational pull in my mind, like it's such a better way to go through life, right? And I subscribe also to this notion that pretty much everything was made up besides the laws of nature, right? I mean, to me, physics is real and chemistry is real. Biology is real. It gets tricky because
they're all real, but it's our understanding of them that varies. So we haven't worked out all of physics yet,
Sure.
Or biology or any of these other things. So I don't think that we should set these aside and say those rules we should follow come hell or high water.
Right. I mean, seeing what may be, like, I could say, listen, because of the laws of gravity, objects fall down, not up. But of course, we could create exceptions to that.
Exactly.
But that humans make up all sorts of rules. Culture dictates, groupthink dictates. And it seems that one of the major detriments to living in this freer way, this more exploratory way that we're talking about today, is this whole thing of theory of mind. That we are able, for better or worse, to get into the minds of others, and in some cases, create ideas, true or not, about how we will be judged if we do A, B, or C. And in doing so, we give up some real estate. We give up some.
So that's perfect, Andrew, because we think we know, but are oblivious to the fact that every single, it's a big statement, behavior can be understood in equal dimensions, equal potency as good or bad. Now, so that I can control what you're thinking. So you think that I'm gullible. You could persuade me that I'm gullible. I can try my hardest not to be gullible, but I'm going to eventually be gullible. And the reason for that is that I value being trusting. And as long as I value being trusting, I'm going to be seen as gullible. As long as you value being flexible, you're going to be inconsistent. As long as you value being stable, you're going to be seen as boring, and so on. And so this is what I said to you before in different terms, that with all that I've studied, found interesting over all these decades, the thing that meant the most to me was the realization that behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or the actor wouldn't do it. Now, if you think about that, that means every single time you're demeaning somebody, or yourself, or you're coming up with a New Year's resolution, what you're doing is denying the sense of what you were doing and saying, oh, you should have done something different. Okay. Once you realize that your behavior makes sense, you like yourself more when you're realizing that, in any relationship, anything that's difficult, is difficult because one of you thinks there's a right way and is denying the other person's perspective. We did this thing so many years ago. I gave people a list of, I don't remember, it was 200 or 300 behavior descriptions. I said, circle those things about yourself that you keep trying to change, but you keep failing at. So for me, I'd circle impulsive, gullible. I won't tell you the rest. Okay. Then you turn the page over, and in a mixed-up random order are the positive versions in each of these. Now people are asked, circle those things you really value about yourself. My spontaneity and my being trusting. And as long as I value being spontaneous, I'm going to appear impulsive, and so on. And so now that I have more respect for myself, because what I did made sense, I carry myself differently. I'm not doing what you were just suggesting before, where I'm tormenting myself and so on. And the people I'm with, there's a lot in the mindful body that deals with language, and only a fraction of the sensitivity I seem to have to language in a different way from the way linguists would study it. But you have things, let's say forgiveness. We have all these terms that seem good. And you know, because you figured me out now, that if you say it's good, I'm going to find a way it's bad. If you say it's bad, good. Okay, so this is one of those. I don't want anybody, certainly not the person closest to me, to ever forgive me. I want to be understood. And if you understand, there's no reason to forgive me because my behavior will make sense or else I wouldn't do it. Okay, so how did this come about? I was asked to give a sermon. I'm Jewish. I have to go to this church because I say yes to everything, and I'm going to give a sermon. What am I going to talk about? I know nothing about religion. Forgiveness. It's not religion, but it sounds religious-y. All right, I'll think about forgiveness. So I think about forgiveness, and what I came up with was sacrilegious. Something. If you ask 10 people, is forgiveness good or bad? What are they going to tell you?
I'm going to tell you it's
good.
Yeah.
If you ask 10 people, is blame good or bad? What are they going to say? It's bad. But you know, you can't forgive unless you first blame. So our forgivers are our blamers. That's interesting. Now, do you blame people for good things or bad things? You blame people for bad things, but things in and of themselves aren't good or bad. So what happens is the people who see the world negatively, who blame, then forgive. Hardly divine. Now, if you blame, it's better to forgive than not forgive. But if you understand why the person did what they did, it obviates the necessity for blame, which then obviates the necessity for forgiveness.
I'd love to bypass blame.
Yeah, well, that's, I think that's the way to do it, is to recognize in a more open-minded way the motivations that people have vary, the consequences. No matter what you do, whatever negative thing it seems, positive things will follow if you allow them and you look at it that way.
Can I ask you
No. Oh, that's right. It's your podcast. Yes, you can.
It's definitely not my podcast. We're here together. Could I ask you for any reflections that come up around this recent thought train I was on? I was laughing at the fact that our species, for whatever reason, seems to keep wanting to build technologies. And that much of our effort these days is focused on trying to undo some of the ills of the technologies that we've developed. So I use smartphones and I love them, and I use social media and I think it's terrific for certain things. But of course, these things have issues, just like the automobile created issues, the television created issues, and on and on. Okay. Fossil fuels and all of this. People will debate fossil fuels. But anyway, you get the point. Every technology brings with it some convenience or some way that humans have been able to overcome nature in some way or work with nature, right? We can't fly, so we build planes. Okay. And I just decided to look at this through a different lens. Like this is amazing. We're sending rockets into space. We'll probably colonize Mars not too long from now if Elon figures it out. And I get the sense he probably will. We got AI just this last week. There's this whole AI thing. Yeah. And so then I started thinking at what point do we just kind of stop? And the answer is pretty clear. It's unlikely that humans are ever going to stop this kind of itch to develop technology. And I thought, wow, we're the only species that does this. If the raccoons get together and they think, okay, let's figure out how to pick locks, actually how to pick locks, as opposed to just go in through crawl spaces. If they've been working on that, they're still failing miserably, right, as far as I know. So it's something so unique to our species among the old world primates to develop technologies. Other animals do it, crows do it, other primates do it, but we are really the utmost example of this. And I just wondered, what do you think the human compulsion is to develop technologies?
I don't think there's a compulsion to develop anything in particular. I think there's a compulsion to develop. There's a compulsion, I wouldn't call it compulsion because that sounds negative, but I think that...
A drive.
All mindfulness is noticing new things, creating new things. With that creation, we're maximally alive. And so if we happen to be on the technology train, then it's technology that's going to get our attention. The people who are in other areas, whether it's creating music, doing what you and I do, it doesn't seem to me any different in principle.
What do you think that's about? I'm not asking us to go into evolutionary psychology, but what do you think it is that humans have this generative spirit in their mind-body, same thing, to express and to create things that have some durability in time or that are just an expression of where we are? I mean, it's so unusual.
I don't think that its durability is what matters. I think then that becomes a social construction. What is the group, the Asians, monks who are going to create art? And, as soon as it's finished, then you bring it down to the water and, to show that nothing lasts.
Yeah, sandcastle, no selfie.
Yeah.
I call it.
Okay.
Sandcastle, no selfie.
Right.
You're just doing it to do it. I actually do a lot of writing these days that, like in my brain, I've always called sandcastle, no selfie. Like it's getting washed away, and then someone says, "Well, you could take a photo of it." It's like, nope. Actually, I just do it just to see. It's just a practice of getting out what I feel I need to get out.
Well, so for my mindfulness book, which I wrote way back when, the secretary I had then was a wonderful guy, but didn't know anything about computers, and I knew less. And so I would give him something, and I'd say, insert this, page 20, whatever. And he would just sort of randomly, because he didn't know what he was doing either. And then at some point, he lost an entire draft of the book. I sort of imagine, and my first thought was probably more typical than my second thought, which is go crazy, oh my God, And then I said to myself, what makes me think that draft was better than the next draft that I can come up with? In some sense, a version of your who cares. And then I just started working on it again. At some point when you're writing these research papers, I think most people come to the point where first numbers count, right? How many publications, Then at some point the game changes and you don't care about the number, and that's freeing. And so it seems a little similar. Mm-hmm. I think that for people to recognize that excitement can be gotten, the threading of the needle, as I said before, would make much of life feel differently. So we did, this is going to seem strange kind of answer here, but we took people who didn't like rap music, people who didn't like football, people who didn't like art. Okay, so a lot of haters, people who don't like anything. One group is just given the activity. The next group is asked to notice one new thing about it. The next group, 3 new things about it.
They're doing it or observing it?
Well, if it's football, they're observing.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you're observing the rear ends of the football players, just noticing new things. And the more you notice, the more you like what you're noticing. And to recognize that that's how simple it is. Now, most people, especially when you're younger, you're waiting for something to pull you, something to grab me and get me all excited. And how freeing if people were taught that you could grab it, whatever the it is, just by noticing. You don't have to hold on to the thing you're holding on to when you're recognizing that you could hold on to the next thing. And I saw the Seinfeld. This was so funny. I thought, it must have been old Seinfeld. After the show, he does a 5-minute stand-up. And I'm going to not do it as well as he, but nor should I. He says, what is this thing with appetites? You go out to dinner and people say, don't eat the bread, you're going to spoil your appetite. There's so many appetites. You spoil this one, there's another one right behind it. And if you realize that high, that total engagement, the passion you were feeling was not a result of anything particular about the person, the context. How freeing it would be. It'd be easy to let things go, knowing that you can have that, a moment
control
later.
This is why at some point in my life, I'm going to tell my team 6 months and I'm done, and I'm going to go do art. And I just don't want to scare anybody. But I love the idea of being able to switch venue and possibly to even change identity, which is something I'd like to talk to you about.
Well, the art is kind of interesting, that I started painting when I was about 50. And I was one of those kids who couldn't draw. So think of education. What mark might I have made on a page that would have led an elementary school teacher to lead me to believe that I had no artistic ability? When you think of a difference between a Mondrian, a Rembrandt, people so different that it's sinful for people to think they know how things should be, so they know who can do it and who can't, as if there's only one way to do whatever it is. And I had this experience, and it was very clear in my mind. So I had this painting, and I have this friend who is an art collector. She drinks a little too much. She came over for a visit, and she saw the painting, a very early painting of mine, and she looks at it and goes, Ellen, there's something there. The important part. Now don't go thinking you're Rembrandt, which wasn't nice, but you had a little too much, but it didn't matter. But my response was so important to me. I didn't say it because I didn't think it would go over well, but I said, and Rembrandt isn't me. Now, I would rather be the very best Ellen Langer than the 500,000th, 5 millionth, whatever, Rembrandt. And when you recognize that quality is a decision people are making. There is no absolute standard. If you know anything about art, let's take even the Impressionists, where people pay so much money today, they were all rejected in their day. When you realize that in some ways, and my work has suggested this to me, that if you're present when you're doing it, you're mindful when you're doing it, somehow that reveals itself in what you're doing. And whether or not it does, you're putting yourself on that canvas, and it's great fun. It's exhilarating. And, when somebody's, belittles it, it's strange to me. Where are those criteria coming from? No different from in schools. I'm very much in favor of trying to create mindful education because, as I said before, I think that it's our system of education that has caused most of the mindlessness. And, a slide that I put on when I give some of these talks, in my view, that virtually, I don't really mean virtually, I have to say it because I'm an academic, right? I believe all of our ills, all of them, Andrew, personal, interpersonal, professional, global, are the indirect or direct effect of our mindlessness. So here we have schools all over the country teaching these absolutes, propagated in magazines, newspapers, taught by our parents, taught to each other, all that are limiting us and causing the problems that we keep trying to solve. And how easy it would be if we just acknowledge everybody doesn't know something, everybody knows something else, everybody can't do something, everyone can do something else. So when you're grading that paper and you're so sure that this paper just doesn't make it, to presume that every smart person in the world would evaluate that the same way, I find distasteful. So constantly, you give tests in school to find out what people don't know. Give tests to find out what they do know.
Turns out it's the best way to learn. I'd researched an episode of a solo episode of this podcast I did, and to figure out what are the best ways to study and learn. It was based on a course that I'd guest lectured in at Stanford. It turns out we have to be careful now. I have to be careful saying things like the best. One of the most effective ways to learn is to self-test for what one knows and doesn't know, but not for sake of evaluation, but for sake of enhancing recall and depth of consolidation. And I think all of us, at least in this country,
but I'm saying something a little different. Is you're saying how to remember, which I agree with that completely. But I'm saying that when we're testing people, we, whoever the we is, decided what is important to know to see, does that student know that, ignoring all the other things that student must know. I said this before, that I was lecturing in South Africa and they put me up in this very fancy hotel, and I had taken a few hours off and I was down by the pool. And there was this enormous amount of the hotel space, the real estate, that was totally unused. The only person who knew that was the lowly cabana boy, who nobody is going to ask what his opinion is. Everybody has a perspective that can add to the larger piece. And by having this idea of those of us on top, we really know, people expect, I'm given this genius award, and, shortly afterwards, every time I say, and you're supposed to be a genius, I never claimed.
The danger of awards that carry titles like genius or even Nobel. I'm not going to poke at my few friends that happen to have Nobels because they've done beautiful work, but it's rare that people who get Nobels do much after that. Right? They become great sources of fundraising for universities, so you get leveraged for that. And I don't think anyone's going to shed a tear for a Nobel Prize winner here, but this brings me to this notion of labels, not just rankings and performance, but labels.
Sure.
I mean,
labels hide all the ambiguity. So if we can use grades. When I give a student an A versus a B, it sounds like they're very different. But imagine, and I've studied this with respect to health, that the person who gets an 89, so you go from an 80 to an 89, you get a B, a 90 to 100, you get an A. Nobody in their right mind would think there's a real difference between the person who's gotten the 89 and the person who's gotten the 90. But their worlds become very different. All the ambiguity is hidden. We studied this. It's the borderline effect, as we call it, so imagine, let's say you and I take an IQ test, and for argument's sake, that you get a 70, so you're normal. I get a 69, so I'm cognitively deprived. I could have sneezed and read the question wrong. I could have come up with multiple answers that could have been better than the one that got the question, and the person who wrote the question, and so on. But now we're put into two different categories.
I've never seen.
And because I'm cognitively deficient, I'm not given the training that I should be given. I no longer think well of myself. And so if you ask me to read certain things, I'd probably opt out, and so on. And in a very short time, the difference between us becomes very real. Well, it's the same thing with a medical diagnosis. There is always somebody who's right below the border, who has it, or
Oh,
who
there we
doesn't
go.
have
Now
it
you can see it.
below, and the person right above
can't
or
see
at
it.
that has it.
I didn't realize the
Where the
screen
two
was not on
scores
for it.
are not meaningfully different, but where one then is told they have the disease and the other not, and the difference becomes real over time. And so we have data supporting that,
Yeah,
and
this
it's almost
gay-looking
just like a
duck.
Duncan experiment, a thought experiment. At some point you have to, put a limit and say, but you
Pokemon.
need to
Have you
always
played it?
know that it's made
I
up.
think this duck looks
So,
kind of gay, but
what is the
it's the latest
expiration date for
release
this can of
character.
food? Well, I mean, there are people who actually go through their shelves and throw these things out because it's 2 weeks old.
Not this one.
Not realizing.
This is
how did they
Unite.
come
I
up
think
with
it's
the
not
date
as
in the first
popular. I think a
place?
lot of people have not played it, but it's basically like a
So,
multi.
but then,
a
to go back
multi-
to what you were saying,
Play a battle arena.
because I'm having the junior moment, that labels, names of things, these categories help us
I
organize
see.
things, but more often,
So you
or
played the
as
latest
often,
games.
hold things still and cause problems.
I see.
I did that first study way back when, called "A Patient by Any Other Name," and we made a videotape of a person being interviewed and showed it to therapists who were either behavior therapists or Freudian types. And the person on the tape was called either a patient or a job applicant. So the exact same tape. When we called the person a patient, they were seen as having hidden this and problems in that and so on. When the person was called a job applicant, they were seen as well-adjusted.
I have a friend who was in elite special operations for a number of years. Very smart guy, very philosophical. And he once said to me, for reasons that I don't recall, he said, the
Looks
two
like
most
League of
powerful
Legends.
but also
Similar. I think
dangerous
it's by
words
the
in
same company,
English
that's
language
why.
are I am. Because anything that follows the words I am will completely constrain your notions of what's possible and
I've
what's
never
not
played the
possible.
League of
And I said,
Legends, though.
why are you telling me this,
I'll
right?
turn it
Because I
off
pointed out that he was
if
from
this is
special
distracting.
operations. He said,
I'm not really
that
paying
he,
attention
and
to
his
that
teammates
thing
had
anyway.
a mode of refreshing their mindset around particular operations that were, because of the division of the military he was in, et cetera, it was quite
I'm not paying
varied. It
attention.
wasn't like they were just sort of doing one type of thing.
Paying attention to it anyway. So I remember on the YouTube video, someone said it's really annoying. What, this game? League of Legends or this? Functions. Ah, okay. I've never tried League of Legends actually, but I think it probably is addictive. The opposing teams. The games are too long. These games are only 10 minutes.
They had to be very adaptive. And he said that
I was playing ranked, but my control stopped working twice, which was super annoying, so I was trying to fix it. I think it's because I'm playing on an emulator on the PC. Normally you're meant to play it on the Switch. This is a quick mode. It's super easy. Ranked mode is harder. You could try it. It's quite addictive, this game. It's not as popular as mainline Pokemon games, but it's yeah. I've never tried League of Legends, but it's probably, I don't know if it's similar. So essentially, you start off with a level 1 Pokemon, and you just level up to maximum 15. So you can play on, if you have an Android or if you have an Android or iPhone, I think you should be able to play it. It's in Play Store, and it's on the Switch too. So you can use my friend code. I can add you here if you want. Oh, I just saw your profile. You're a girl. I can follow you on here. Yeah, you can download it. It's I think it's pretty addictive. No, I didn't see your profile, your girl. Okay. Oh no. I banned the wrong character. I banned Gyarados by accident. Looks like what? It's fun, but I don't know if it's fun to watch. So I think Pokemon Go is too addictive. I think in terms, I play Pokemon Go as well, probably at least an hour a day, which is already too much for me. This is more like if you ever played the MMO, it's like you play, you technically play as a Pokemon, you never play as the trainer. You can walk around on the map. Obviously you can see it. The maximum level you can get within the game is 15, but at each game you start at level 1. The games are usually 10 minutes. A quick match is 5 minutes. And the goal of the game is to score as many points as possible. But you need good teammates to win for a higher rank. For the lower rank, like beginner, it's super, what's the right word? It's too easy, so as long as you, in the ranked matches, as long as you're ultra, as long as you're expert or below, it's all super easy. It only gets harder at master rank, so this is master rank. It's mostly guys that play, I think. I think even the girl avatars are probably men. Yeah. Pokemon is good. Pokemon is good. Also apparently I don't talk a lot when I'm playing this game because I'm concentrating too much. But that guy definitely paid for his costume, that Latios costume. So I get complaints that I don't talk as much. I definitely don't talk as much playing this game though. Because I'm focusing on fucking playing it. My favorite Pokemon is Garchomp. It's in this game, but I don't use Garchomp in this game because it's different from the mainline Pokemon games. So there's no type in this game. It's mainly you want to level up as much as possible because leveling up makes you stronger. You level up from defeating the wild Pokemon and scoring and KOing too. What the hell is that Piplup doing, man? Oh my god. And Piplup just died for no reason. But this is master rank, so people need to play well. If you don't play well, you can pretty much... I ate all the berries by accident. Must be lost. Yeah. Feraligatr is super strong. You're 100% locked in. Oh, we actually managed to score. So funny, man. managed to score that one. Because usually in Master League, it's actually quite hard to score in that area. Level 14. Dude, we beat them too hard on this one. Opposing teams grounded. Yeah, I don't think I talk a lot when I'm playing it because I'm too focused on playing it. If it's like a different game like Champions, I'll talk more. Concentration was necessary. 26% performance. 11 KOs. Number 1 KO. Yeah, man. It needs coordinated team play. If your teammates are bad, in lower ranks it's really easy to play because a lot of the players are really shit. Even that or they're bots. But this is master rank, so I think people tend to play better. If you're up against a team that's really coordinated, you're likely to lose. So it's not in master rank. You can't just win being one good player. You need multiple players. It's like a team. Oh, they banned Feraligatr. Because I like Feraligatr's quite strong right now, which is why I was using it. Use something else. They banned Feraligatr, makes dream work. Yeah, it's I kind of like it's like also like that in business. I try to do things by alone and it's not really working. Mewtwo. Mewtwo's in this game, but Mewtwo's not that strong. Mewtwo's obviously very strong in the mainline games. So in this game, there's an attacker, there's all-rounders, and there's defenders. So in Master League, you mostly need at least one defender. Because attackers, you can try the game, but I don't think it's everyone's favorite. It is addictive though. I prefer it to Pokemon Go because in Pokemon Go, there's no real raid games. I mean, other than raid battles, but I don't think it feels like this. I play it a lot. I find it too addictive to a point where I don't want to play it, but there's so many events which makes me play it, if that makes sense. No, I don't. I love playing it either. I've tried playing real life, but I went to an event. It's mostly nerds though. Like It's like the nerdiest of the nerd kind of vibe. But what I feel like I'm judging them when I'm saying that, but like, I don't know. I've been to trading card events, and like, usually I feel like there's like normal people there. A shiny Celebi, okay, that's nice. I didn't get a shiny Celebi. I got a shiny Tyrant. It's not my favorite Pokemon. It's like a blue Tyrant. I've been Pokemon Go players in person. It varies. I also find them kind of antisocial. So I don't know. I'm probably judging them too hard. The fossils. The fossil Pokemon? Which fossil Pokemon in particular?
了，
不乐干嘛？
那个要高要土。
Teammates are bad. These teammates suck. They suck compared to the last ones. They're not playing that well. That's my opinion. See, I don't think they're playing very well.
Oh, 为什么这边这么多肉？
哦，你没减肥。Damn. No, it's not Japanese, Chinese. This Pokemon is strong, apparently. In Unite. 我知道 Macaroni 肯定不懂玩这个，因为他屁股太臭。啊，我的手臂好痛啊！ What the fuck, man? There's 2 attackers. What? There's no defender again. Defender needed. Use SB on what? I don't know why this person played Absol, man. Absol I don't think is that good. In this game. I don't think it's good in mainline games either. Fraligator, the Mew of the skin. Yeah, it probably appeals to women. They give them so many costumes. But you have to unlock it, I guess, during events. While aware. Okay, have fun. I can see you later.
đúng là thế à cho này rồi qua có đồ cũng đồ bên đi đồ nó接下来对
你把绿屏灭了，就是绿个看抓看。我啲嚟住你兩落看下場。我驚他們給的，不然他就沒地。
就是因为美国在打伊朗，打到后来的时候，连弹药都没有了，连 F-16都没有，然后没有经过韩国的同意，就把能驻韩的美军都上来冲走。
那這個我那邊沒地。
就是我这么
打電話俾咩
不需要动，你也要跟我打个招呼啊。
反正我什麼冇騙嘛，最多佢啫。
我们有
有没有我给哦
如果兩，
我都认为
你冇厲害一場，啊都冇厲害，佢嘅厲害。
我的今年呢，就是在代表今年要在
我沒啊，佢哋會啫嘛。真的太抓地，
哎
不能不壓了，
我觉得这跟韩国在政治上其实并不愿意配合美国在第一岛链当中的扮演很积极的角色。
我的肉是这样子，会抖。
他的在韩国的
哎呀，看得没了，等我看。等我聽到你講。你冇去介意啦？
大陆是第拜
綠噶。佢講冇咗意度。其實我個意度多啲，係。個住嗰邊佢個多3房啊！我講我對乜我都冇玻璃的，都冇。我講對啲路哦，係啊嚟，而家阿能嗌唔係淨嗌哈，喂。怎麼不尖哈？喂哈，冇尖佢呀。可是问题，人家美方就要看你的讯息。所以剧也都这样子的，人家都对我迷你。你们现在这些执政啊，你们不要给我乱动，哎，你不要以为你可以把两岸关系推到什么哈金兄战尾，你又把美国拉进一场，你想要让我美国你看到冇掉，别闹你可真了。战争嘛，美国不会让。你看到你别闹你干嘛？已经告诉你了。让你啊上任以来创历史纪录不能到美国过境，这个讯息已经够清楚。对。然后现在你看，你的那个肌肉，国民党目前在政府里面，但立法院只是一个正式的机关啊。
你不要买有酒的，那是酒，有病。
政治信号，
放
强的政治信号。然后韩国也表现很好。
哦，那
上面
是酒
是用酒煮。
跟美国人谈实质问题啊。
臊子是酒的。
一个就变就说讲我们跟美国的关系，他也有一点点出来，让美国人觉得。
我研究
要
酒就不能喝酒。
酒在哪一个？在哪一个？上面一个。
Stout 对。
Stout 哦，我不知道。
你都吃出来不是有酒味？
不是，我不能吃。
对酒，你就不能喝。
他也打出一个很好的球，所以我觉得这一次。我很怕，就是说，
顾问这份我都是要英语。
雷尔校长会不高兴。
对我自己也觉得，雷尔校长
也很不高兴。然后你看，你连过境都不给我过，
对，
阿娜把我的反对党的那个这韩国搞得那么高规格，你去查一查。
这面还没煮，等下回来。
有一个立法院长到华府有这种规格，直接跟他的美国的国会议长高规格的。到他的办公室坐在那边谈事情，然后呢还握手，然后还公布，这个真的你们去查一下，
史无前例之高，
史无前例之高。那这个就变成这就是美国对目前台湾内部政治状态的一个重要讯号，重要信号。另外一方面呢，国民党的路线，美国并没有反对。
对。
好，非常谢谢谢大使的分析哦。从外交的角度，从美国现在释放的讯号，以及呢为什么到强森的办公室去跟他见面，各位，这些就是外交上的小细节，这些以上的50件事都是美国和美国安排好的。谢谢谢大使给我们详细的分析，让人报很精彩，对不对？来，我们的好朋友帮我们把链接分享出去，帮我们按赞应援，待会回来。
你规定说法，六个月不一样。摸到拖啦，有啲摸到拖啊，多啦。我哋係幾想溜嚟。邊度補嘅邊？
现在，长荣航空直飞华盛顿，6月26盛大启航。I'm on my way. See you there.
那么呢，欢迎回来。外交出访其实有时候也是这样子哦。我们说这个内行看门道，外行看热闹。有时候我们看一些航展也是嘛。今天非常荣幸，我们的外交大使在现场，所以我们就刚才分析非常的到位，对不对？来，今天我们请到了敬平哥，来，敬平哥你怎么看呢？很多人一直把韩国瑜、郑丽文拿来比较，就故意想要酸这个郑丽文啊。但是呢，郑丽文啊，他自己
握手，然后我们找一间漂亮的一个会议室来办就。为什么呢？我觉得规格搞得不够高。
哎呦，还不够高。
不够高。我们以前办过，我都办过啊。他这个外交的，我以前办过这种 reception 啊。我们在美国国会，我们过去的经营那个根基非常非常的雄厚。以前你们那个年代做的，现在都做不太。不是，这看主办的。
我講為咗那不大書咁樣驚嘅錯，都幾壓過嘅，但是他會進嘅，對吧？啊？
資源比我們還多。哎，可是問題他要。
没關係，他房子也很不是亂，就是它很舊，比我們這個房子更舊。
環境要弄好了，要跟倉庫一樣的，怎麼想？很難看。
誰叫你換這麼多垃圾？
對，我有10分力量，他說3分給你就好。不要把韓國瑜搞太。
進來要跟我們兩個說一句，然後提早休息班一點出去啊。
怎麼韓國瑜給他搞成這種小場面啊？我們以前在美國都不能去，
他沒有問叫來這邊。
大家好。
但是他應該會想，但是他沒有問。
日本是的。
沒有，你們也可以才走2個禮拜的，就是那麼快。
身為富士電機的高管。
英國人就是這樣。
那你們好像是個呼吸。
把他偷偷的从海关带出去，显然不是所谓的走私的常客，所以在过海关的时候神情紧张，当场被活逮。这2位富士电机的高管，很可能要被
還沒賭啊，要回來換面。
为什么他们要铤而走险？富士电机的高管在日本拥有非常好的
你老跟我就做這種，我這個牙齒進我，你只係個講你講，我難度冇能還到，你老懂我明白的，我講我牙齒進我，講你講什麼嘟我難度冇能還到。
情况越来越严重。什么叫稀土？它就是17种微量元素的总称。中国大陆把稀土限制出口，尤其针对日本。中国大陆算是善良，没有对日本全禁，还给日本开了一个活路。但是毕竟日本很多的企业，大家抢着用稀土，现在已经出法，一旦缺了稀土，稀土有个外号，叫做工业味精，又叫做科技的维生素。
是没有它不行。所以当没有了稀土的时候，日本的军工产业、汽车产业、半导体产业、科技产业、造船产业、医疗产业都垮了，都难以为继了。而且时间越过去，到了下半年，它会越来越困难。另外，中国大陆对于原来一些无矿的产品也限制它到日本。你没有了无矿的产品，那日本的半导体产业停摆。AI 产业停摆，对日本的产业的冲击非常的大，尤其对日本创造最多就业机会的核心产业汽车产业，那更是致命的。所以日本现在企业界真的是一片哀嚎。
They had to completely wipe away this I am component of their vocabulary, except as it related to the word adaptive. It was like, I am adaptive. So, but there was never a title to who they were, what they were, once they entered the context of a planning and execution of one of these operations. Very, very interesting way of thinking about identity, how it shapes mindset, how it constrains it and opens doors, and converts things into action and or failure to execute.
Yeah.
I found it very intriguing, because here's a guy who wouldn't normally think of this stuff, but it turned out he said that was a very potent tool for them. Yeah.
Well, I think that as soon as you're learning something, and if you have your sense of as if you're going to be the same person over the next 70 years, for example, we don't actually cognize that, but without literally realizing that you're not going to be the same person, and you take in whatever you've just learned and continue doing it the exact same way. We go back to tennis. You learn the game of tennis when you're 15, and now you're 40. You shouldn't be doing any of it the same way.
Why do you think we get
now you're 80 again, and so what happens is your performance is not going to be as good as it could be because the 80-year-old body is trying to do it as if it's a 15-year-old, rather than taking advantage of. There are positive things that happen as you get older. They're not all negative. If I'm playing tennis with I don't know, 15-year-old kid, I'm going to win without having to move very much because they don't know what they're doing, so that you don't need the same skills the more experience you have with the task, necessarily at least. You see what I'm saying is that we freeze our own behavior. Every time you learn something, the way we learn everything, it just boggles the mind. You learn how to drive, and then you freeze the way you're learning how to drive when you know the least about how to drive. And that's the way you're going to do it for the rest of your life. A driving thing, just as not really apropos of anything except in the car, that if you're driving on ice, what do? The car starts to skid. You're driving on ice.
Well, I know
in California, you don't pay.
I know what you don't do. You don't slam on the brakes. You come off. You slowly come off the gas.
Now
I've driven on the East Coast a little bit.
That's exactly wrong, Andrew. That used to be the case. You see,
Okay.
so you've heard this is the way we learn everything. You start the way things are right now. That when you skid, we were told that what you're supposed to do is gently hit the brake and turn into it. Now that there are anti-lock brakes, the safest way to stop that car is to jam on those brakes. But just think about it, because it's the way we learn everything. You learn, in this case, you're learning how to drive for safety's sake. And then you mindlessly continue that, and it becomes very unsafe.
I didn't get the memo.
No, most people don't. That's why I brought it up now, seeming apropos of almost nothing. But we need to understand that things are changing and pay attention to the way that they're changing and change with it. And, the more you hold yourself, we're talking about identity, the more you hold yourself still, the harder that's going to be. I'm much older, as most people are, than I used to be, but I don't have any sense of age. I really don't. In fact, the other day now means years ago, I was helping this woman with something, and somebody dear to me said, you're probably 20 years older than she is. I had no sense. I thought I was helping this old person. Age is just not a relevant factor for me. Sometimes you want to be aware of age. We did some research where we have people who, there are cues in the environment that often tell us how old we are, and those are not always so good. So, for example, if at my age, I'm in a fancy store, and I go to buy, let's say, a dress, a skirt, okay, it would be inappropriate for me to buy a mini skirt. I'm too old to be wearing almost nothing there, right? So clothing tells you how old the person is. Now, we did research, just archival research, with people who wore uniforms. Then if you're wearing a uniform from the first day you start working, you're there 30 years, there's no difference. Okay. There's no age-relevant cue. And in those situations, are healthier.
Really?
Yeah, because they're not getting the cue that they're old.
I'd like to take a quick break and acknowledge one of our sponsors, Our Place. Our Place makes my favorite pots, pans, and other cookware. Now, I've discussed on this podcast before that the PFASs, or forever chemicals like Teflon, have been linked to major health issues such as endocrine disruption, that means hormone disruption, gut microbiome disruption, fertility issues, and many other health problems. So it's really important to avoid them. This is why I recently fell in love with Our Place products, especially one of their cooking pans, the Titanium Always Pan Pro. Our Place products are made with the highest quality materials and are all PFAS and toxin free. They're beautifully designed and function extremely well for all your cooking needs. Most mornings I cook eggs in it, I cook ground beef in it, ground venison, and the titanium pan is also designed in a way that allows eggs and meat to cook perfectly without sticking to the pan. It's extremely easy to clean, and like all Our Place products, it's nice to look at when sitting on the counter or on the stove. For a limited time, Our Place is offering an exclusive 20% discount on their innovative Titanium Always Pan Pro, designed to last a lifetime and completely toxin-free. Visit FromOurPlace.com/Huberman and use the code SAVEHuberman20 to claim the offer. So if one has parents, let's say, who are quote unquote slowing down a bit, and they're talking a little bit about some aches and pains, and there's a stairwell in the house, for instance, and they're starting to say things like, at some point we're either going to have to move into a place that doesn't have a stairwell, or put one of those chair lifts things, or maybe just move into the downstairs. Mm-hmm. Do you think that in just thinking about that, they're going to accelerate the demise of their locomotor ability?
I do actually. I think that when we start entertaining these negative thoughts and evaluating ourselves, we're always going to find evidence. As you get older, you start, oh my God, am I forgetful? So you pay attention each time you forget, and that makes it even worse. When I said to my students in this health class, smart kids at Harvard, this is on Thursday, I teach Tuesday and Thursday, I said, what was the last thing I said in class on Tuesday? Nobody remembers. I said, you must be getting dementia. All right. So that when a young person forgets, it's okay. They don't pay any attention to the forgetting. As you get older and you forget, you get less involved in what you're doing. If you're trying to learn something, you have the competing part of you saying, that you're not going to remember this, and so on. And independent of all of this, I think a lot of the loss in memory has nothing to do with memory. When I was young, and you're introducing me to people, I thought it was important for me to remember their names. Andrew, I know, doesn't speak well of me. I don't really care. You're going to introduce me to 5 of you. What do I care? If I'm going to need their names, chances are I will meet them again, right? So afterwards, if you say to me, remember Jim, and I say to you, which one was Jim? It wasn't that I forgot. To forget means I had to have learned it in the first place. And so if you don't learn it in the first place because you don't care, because your values change as you get older, then it's not a matter of forgetting when you don't know it in the second place. And I think that, if we turn it around, because now I'm doing this because I know you expect it of me, and we say, what if you remembered everything? Everything.
That'd be terrible.
How would you get through, you wouldn't get to experience anything new. So forgetting, serves a purpose. And I used to think, I never tested this, and now I came up with this years ago, and I think it's probably wrong, but it's kind of fun, that people, as they get older, they become hard of hearing. But it also happens that the older you get, the more you realize nobody's really saying anything. And so being hard of hearing protects you from a lot of that noise.
Yeah, my grandfather used to just turn off his hearing aid. Yeah. I started I've always had glasses for reading at night when my eyes would get fatigued or something, but recently I came to my awareness that my vision at a distance is very, very sharp. I'm like an eagle. I can read numbers for very far away. But my vision up close has been diminishing. I find myself straining a bit more even than this, so I started wearing eyeglasses.
You should have the book further away.
Or I should have the book further away, but I've just kind of defaulted to eyeglasses, and then but I realized that because I understand the neuroplasticity of the visual system, that I'm certainly accelerating the demise of my near vision by wearing glasses, and so I'm trying to balance the two.
Well, do you know our vision study? This is kind of fun. So I'm in the doctor's office, and like everybody else, I'm given the Snellen eye chart.
Mm-hmm. The letters, the Snellen is the letters exactly. And numbers, yeah.
Okay, and, but I'm different from most people. And I resent that the letters are getting smaller and smaller because it's creating an expectation that soon I won't be able to see. So I ask, what would happen if the letters got larger and larger? Which would be to change the expectation that soon I will be able to see. Mm-hmm. So when we do that, people are able to see what they weren't able to see before. Now, most of us have trouble around 2/3 of the way down the chart. Mm-hmm. So what we did was start the chart 1/3 of the way down. Mm-hmm. So the letters are smaller than on top. So now 2/3 of the way down, that starting point, the letters are really small. And what happens is, again, people can see what they couldn't see before.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the idea that your vision has to get worse, I think there are many, many instances where that's not the case. But also, the whole test of vision is bizarre. How often in your life are you looking at letters that make no sense? If I don't want to see you, I'm going to see you a lot sooner, be able to run away from you. If I'm hungry, I can see the restaurant sign much quicker than if I'm not hungry. I see things in color that are different in black and white, so on and so forth. And to lose all of that with a two-dimensional eye test seems to me... And again, we haven't touched on this, but it's probably important with respect to vision. It's true with everything. In fact, I tell people, you're wearing glasses. Try it without glasses. You want to see when you can see and when you can't see. With almost everything, we again hold things still when they're varying. Now, what I mean by this is that, let's say with vision, my guess is that 11 o'clock in the morning, my vision is better than at 7 o'clock at night.
The data, yes.
Okay, I mean, it'd be hard for it not. So what does this say? This says maybe I should either have a nap. I don't nap, so I should have an energy bar. And even an energy bar is cute. It's just a candy bar, but you call it an energy bar, you're allowed to eat it. It's like you take a piece of cake, put it in a muffin tin. It's called a muffin. It's healthier than the piece of cake. Anyway, all that, be that as it may. That control, a great amount of control over our physical well-being comes about by attention to variability, which is just a fancy way of talking about mindfulness. Mindfulness is noticing change. That's what it means to be variable. All right, so if you took your glasses off and you saw for yourself, what are the times, what are the moments that you're having, I'm not talking about people who are almost blind, where I can't see and when I can see. And then you ask yourself why. And that it may be the case that it's a particular font, or more likely that you're tired, and then you have other options. But once you start wearing them, it's like taking a laxative. Take a laxative once, it's fine. If you're taking a laxative all the time, you're teaching your body to depend on the laxative. You teach ourselves by some of these things that are supposed to be helpful, then we teach ourselves to need them in ways we otherwise wouldn't. And so we did this attention to symptom variability with big diseases. So when you have a chronic illness, first, the way most people understand chronic illness is that there's nothing that can be done about it.
Yeah, the word chronic implies that.
Exactly. But all it means is the medical world doesn't have a fix. It doesn't mean there's nothing can be done. Now, you have your symptoms with the chronic illness. The presumption, most of the time, I would think, is that the symptoms are going to stay the same or get worse. Nothing only moves in one direction. Sometimes it's a little better, sometimes a little... The stock market, it's going up. It doesn't go up in a straight line. It goes up, down a little, and so on. All right. So when it's better, why is it better? So we do this. We call people periodically, and we simply ask them, how is the symptom now? Is it better or worse than the last time we called, and why? Several things happen. The first, by engaging in the whole process, people feel less helpless, and that turns out to be good for your health. Second, once you start noticing that now it's a little better, or it can even be a little worse, you feel better because you thought that it was, always maximally, I'm always in pain, I'm always stressed, whatever it is. Third, or whatever I'm up to. By asking the question, why now is it better or worse than before, you engage in a mindful search. And I have decades of evidence that mindfulness itself, the neurons are firing, that itself is good for your health. And then finally, I believe you're more likely to find a solution if you're looking for one. So we've done this with multiple sclerosis, chronic pain, Parkinson's, stroke, and biggies. And in each case had very positive results. And the good thing about these sorts of things is that there are no negative side effects. And it doesn't mean that you have to stop doing any medical procedures you may be doing. But you're back in charge of your own healthcare. Why does this hurt now? Stress. There are some people who think they're stressed all the time. Nobody has anything all the time. So I call you, Andrew, and I say, how stressed are you now and why? And we go through this over time. And then you find out, you're stressed when you're talking to Ellen Langer. Well, then the solution is easy. Don't talk to me.
I've been thinking about deadlines a lot lately. And we hear stories of, people being told, I need this done in 15 days. And if people are forced to do it in 15 days, somehow they're able to get it done in 15 days. And certainly there are limits to this. If you told me I need to write 1,000 pages in 5 minutes, there would be very little on each page. But staying within the bounds of reason of what we're talking about when we say there's a deadline in X number of days, why do you think it is that our perception of what's possible tends to scale with A, what's been done before, so precedent or no precedent, the 4-minute mile, for instance, until Bannister broke it, no one else broke it, he broke it, lots of people have broken it since, and did immediately afterwards. So what do you think about this notion of what's possible in terms of preordained human decision constraints, like no one can break the 4-minute mile. Someone breaks the 4-minute mile, now we reset to a new reality in time and in sort of capability. Because I feel like much of what we believe about ourselves is also constrained by our beliefs about the outside world. And as you pointed out earlier, all of that's just a human script that is the play we're all in.
Yeah, I think that the first part is what guides most of us, is what's been done before. And the fact that nobody has done it, to me, means nothing, but to a lot of people. See, people create theories working backwards, which is they often take what is and then derive rules to explain why it has to be like that. Once you believe it has to be like that, then it doesn't occur to you to do anything other than that. But if we start off with the notions of science that I was talking about before, that it's all just probability, no absolutes, then it wouldn't occur to you to stay within the rigid boundaries. Not the best answer, but the only one that came to mind.
No, it's a great answer. I'm trying to think about the use of the scientific method, which is what you use in your lab and in your research, and why it is that you haven't, it seems, challenged the scientific method itself, except at the level of like what hypothesis you're going to test. I mean, in order to do great science, I mean, at some point you need statistics, you need sample size to be sufficient. The rigor of your studies is as important as the originality of the questions you're asking. And so it seems that you've embraced the scientific method as at least useful.
Yeah, that's the key. That, to me, it's a means of speaking to certain people, and it carries with it a certain gravitas. But I by no means feel that it's giving answers that are any more absolute. Well, as I said before, that all of the answers are probabilities. So it's just a language to use. The counterclockwise study was criticized because I didn't publish it in a standard journal, because my assumption of it's very hard if you're doing something over a week's time to control for every possibility. And what I was trying to do in that study was to show that vision, for example, can be improved. That lots of the things that people presume are wired in, as you get older, it gets worse and worse, that just doesn't have to be that way. But I'm having trouble remembering now, because I know that I was going to write a paper taking the whole science of science apart and never did. And if I had written the paper, I'd probably remember what I was going to say and answer your question. Well, it's a good one, but I don't think that there's anything that is described as absolute that's going to be right, whether it's physics, even physics, biology, psychology, anything. That our methods can only take us so far. And the people who get beyond that are the people who don't presume that that's as far as you can go. If you can go this way, you can go a little further. I was a chemistry major when I was an undergraduate, and the problem was I practiced Jewish chemistry, which was a little as good, a little more is better, which is not the way to do chemistry. But I don't know what it is that leads some people to be rigid and to take everything that is told to them as if it must be, and what it is that led me to a different way of being. And testing it, or just thinking that some of the things that people say just made no sense to me.
Not long ago, we went through one of the biggest public health crises of at least my lifetime, and at least two major controversies arose. One was the extent to which masks should or shouldn't be worn and are useful or no. The other is about the so-called vaccines. And this is...
Yeah, no, I think those are beautiful examples, because, one can make an argument that you should wear masks, but the other side also makes sense. The way masks were preventing, even nonverbal communication, which is very important, and important to people's health, right? Your relationships are not an inconsequential part of your well-being. Vaccines, there is no treatment that's going to be good for everybody. Somebody very close to me, if given Dexedrine, puts her to sleep.
Dexedrine is basically speed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Puts her, and so when we recognize the uncertainty inherent in all of these things, I think we don't mandate things in quite the same way. Now, you can mandate that people wear masks, but it shouldn't be that people wear masks because we're absolutely certain that masks should be worn. There are other arguments to be made why people should wear masks.
Or not wear masks.
Or not wear masks,
Yeah.
Whatever the case is going to be. I think it's important that in the medical world, that I think I gave this talk at one point, and I thought I was talking to 5,000 women with breast cancer. And it turned out there were lots and lots of physicians there. If I had known that, I might have spoken a little differently. And so afterwards, I said, oh my goodness, because I was not flattering. I have great respect for most of these people. But then I found out afterwards that they were thrilled because they know they don't know. And, operating on the world with an awareness that you can't be sure leads to a different humility, a different way of appreciating other people when they disagree with you, and so on. And I don't know how you do that at the higher level, government and so on. But this is maybe a silly example, but meaningful to me. So I spend a lot of time in Mexico, and there's this very busy intersection. And there are no stop signs, there are no traffic lights, and there are no accidents. Because everybody knows there's no traffic light, there's no stop sign, you have to pay attention to what's going on. So lots of these rules and laws divert attention to as if there's only one thing that matters. So when you're told to drive 60 miles an hour, what does that mean? That if you drive 70, you're going to get a ticket. Okay, so if you're not afraid of getting the ticket, but there are other considerations to how fast you might go. The quality of your car, the quality of the roads, is it raining at the moment, how uncomfortable or comfortable the passengers are. And all of this gets, and much more, gets lost by having the rule, 60, as if that, somehow is an absolute truth.
Yeah, and experience matters, at least in my view, because, so for instance, going back to vaccines, right? I'm not trying to create unnecessary controversy here, but it's absolutely clear to me that there are people who believe that, for instance, the COVID vaccines were immensely valuable. On the whole, it saved lives, et cetera. And there are other people who are absolutely convinced that the vaccines caused injury, perhaps to them or to people that they know. And both sides, as it were, seem to know a lot about
their side.
Yeah. And so the discussions aren't really discussions.
Yeah.
Because the people that felt that they had a vaccine injury know an immense amount about that injury, the context, and others who had it.
Yeah.
The people who had a different experience of the vaccines or have a different stance of the COVID vaccine know a tremendous amount about the statistics and mass of what the general outcomes were as a consequence. Okay, so it's futile, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not a meaningful discussion. And then what ends up
But it didn't have to be that way. That we go back to the beginning, and in school, you're asked a question and expected to give a single answer. Life would be so different for us as we grow up if you gave multiple answers to whatever the question was. That immediately would make clear that there are alternative perspectives. So just a very simple change in schools.
Well, then I'd like to challenge an idea, since that seems to be challenging assumptions.
One of my ideas, no.
No, not one of your ideas. I'd like to challenge the assumption that as people get older, they become more set in their ways. Because many times today, I'm hearing that as one, and I'm getting older, I now can say, I'm so happy I can say I'm almost 50. I actually love getting older. I feel better now.
Me too.
I feel better now at almost 50 than I did in my 20s.
Yeah.
And psychologically and physically.
Yeah.
And I felt great then.
Yeah.
So I challenge the assumption that we get worse with age.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I'm much older than you are.
So do we get set in our ways, or maybe we're more flexible in our thinking?
I think that the older you are, let's say you've tried different ways of doing something, and there's a particular way that works for you. And it doesn't matter if the other way is faster, is prettier, is whatever, this works. And so you can be seen as set in your way because you've made it, because it doesn't really matter. I could do it that way, or this way. I'm going to continue to do it this way. I think as you get older, presumably you've had more mindful experience, because if you're a robot, you're not going to be learning anything, and getting more set or less set is an irrelevant question. But I remember, this goes back to the pancreas. My not eating the pancreas. Like, I really believed I had to eat that pancreas to show that I was all grown up. So you get a little older and you realize, I wrote this blog once, long time ago, where you're 2 years old and you fall and you're screaming bloody murder because you scraped your leg. And then you're 7 years old and Johnny or Janie didn't send you a Valentine, and you're distressed. And then you're 13 years old and you have a pimple, and oh my God, no one's ever going to find me attractive. And it goes on. And at some point, this was all kind of silly. And, and with that, you become easier. But sometimes that easier can be misunderstood by others. So let me give you an example. And I talk about this in the book when I talk about 3 levels. That in the example I use, The New Yorker is a wonderful magazine. But let's say we have 3 levels. Level 1, people who don't read The New Yorker. Level 2, people who read the New Yorker. Level 3, people who don't read the New Yorker anymore. We could have them read it again, but let's just, okay. Level 1, not reading, and those not reading it anymore are very different. But they're seen as the same by the level 2s. Level 2 people are the bane of my existence. All right, so let's say you're young, you're uninhibited, level 1. Then you're like most people, you become very inhibited. Then, hopefully, you get to a certain point in life, you say, who cares? And you become disinhibited. Not uninhibited, because you know the rule. You're just choosing not to follow it. But those at the level 2 will see the level 3 and think they're level 1s, because you can't see beyond your own level of development. When I was young, especially if I'm on an important show like yours, Andrew, and we just took a break for a minute, and if I had eaten something and I got a spot on my sweater, I'd sit like this. Not even realizing how stupid does this look, right? But that no one should see that I got,
Yeah, God forbid you're human, you spilled a piece of food.
Who cares? So I do this thing with my students, and it's very simple, but it has a very big effect on them, where I tell them, you can't come to class next week unless you're wearing 2 different shoes. Very hard. Some won't come to class. Most come. Then a large majority wear 2 different shoes that look the same. 2 different black sneakers that are, and then you have the bold where you got a red and a black sneaker.
That's cool.
And we talk about things. Nobody even notice. And if they notice, what are they noticing? Somebody who knows you is not going to judge you differently because you're wearing 2 different. They're going to assume there's some reason for it. And those who don't know you. So what do you care? So this wonderful young woman. I did this in my seminar as well. That was in the lecture class. She comes in, she says, Professor Langer, you won't believe what happened. I said, what happened? She said, I'm in the elevator. There's this guy. He looks at my feet. He looks at my face. He looks at my feet. He looks at my face. He looks at my feet, and he points, and he says, was that intentional? You know what I did? I said, no, what did you do? She said, I looked at his feet. I looked at his face. I looked at his feet. I pointed to his feet and said to him, was that?
So good.
And when people recognize that everything is sort of in some sense up for grabs, that none of it really matters. It's so freeing. And there's so many ways that we constrict ourselves. And to make it an answer to your question, hopefully you get older and you realize that most of this, it just doesn't matter. Now you can learn that when you're younger. All you need to do is recognize that those people who you think are thinking you're X, there are other people who are going to go, yay, you're X. That you may love me because I'm trusting. You may dislike me because I'm gullible. So, you can't please everybody, not because your behavior is unpleasant, but because all of it is up for their own definition, and you can't control the way they're going to see it.
It's like our sense of justice kind of gets in the way sometimes. I mean, sense of justice can be very important in society, so don't get me wrong. But for instance, recently I had the experience where a news story came out. It wasn't about me.
And those are the only ones you read, right?
It came out, and the headline was, well, I'm just going to say what it was, that so-and-so's home, this famous person's home, was destroyed in the LA fires. Had a description of what had happened, had a photograph of the home before and after, the devastation. And I immediately got upset because that was not their home. That was my home.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, now I hadn't lived in that home in a while, so there was no reason for them to say that it was my home. I wasn't upset that they didn't say it was my home. But there was my Toyota 4Runner parked in the driveway.
Oh, wow.
Like, basically, the whole thing was made up.
Yeah.
And I actually know the reporter because they had tried to contact me once before. They had somehow got a hold of my phone number, which frustrates me in addition to that. And I realized...
That was my fault.
And I realized they're just making up lies.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even attempting to fact check. Now, this was a minor thing whose home it was, perhaps.
Yeah.
But they made a bunch of issues around this. And then another article came out about this person. And another one. And I don't believe anything that I read, certainly from that particular venue. And then I started to realize that probably half or more of what we read in traditional popular press is just made up. And no one's fact-checking this stuff because how could they? Like, how could they know? And of course, I'm not going to pursue this in any kind of legal way. I don't really care.
Yeah.
But my sense of justice is what frustrated me. And as soon as I went,
but what difference does it make?
That's kind of funny. Like this reporter, so desperate for a story and to capitalize on the horrible events, felt that they needed to do. And I thought, this is like ridiculous, and our species is just so weird. This is what I always default to in the end, whether or not it's about technology, about something else. I mean, real tragedies are real tragedies. And when those happen, as the fires were, it upsets me. But so much of like what grabs our attention and the drama of things is just humans being ridiculous. Yeah. Sometimes lying, sometimes in service to one thing, or pretending it's in service to justice when in fact it's in service to themselves, or a combination of things. And I think as I've hit this, like what I hope is a
Almost
new
50.
vista in my life, I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, like we're really obvious. Like we're so obviously silly. Like the game, I bring up Rick Rubin again. He has this saying that he repeats over and over to me. He said, look, there are only two truths: nature and professional wrestling. He loves professional wrestling. He watches hours and hours of professional wrestling. And I said, why do you do that?
Isn't that...
He said, it's made up and everyone knows it's made up.
But it doesn't matter.
Which
because
is
the
why
dancer-
it actually is
Yeah.
one of the few things that's real.
Yeah.
Because we all know it's made up. So
Yeah.
whether or not they become allies or they become enemies in a given match, or whether or not somebody breaks the rules and the ref pretends they don't see, it's theater.
Yeah.
And it's designed to show you the theater that is human nature.
Yeah.
I never had any appreciation for professional wrestling.
Well,
I thought, but he's right. It's
yeah.
just, and so once you start looking, it's all made up.
Yourself, well,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be made up or not. If you ask yourself, what difference does it make?
The wrestling?
No, any of it. So it's your house, it's somebody else's
Exactly.
house.
I realized I was the one being
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
I'm upset because there's some injustice. Because what? Because I don't want my forerunner in a news
Yeah.
article about someone else's home. Maybe that person had a home that looked very similar.
Right.
But I guess
Yeah.
it was the break with my assumption that the traditional media tries to get things right.
Yeah.
That they at least try. And in this case, the person clearly
Wasn't
didn't even try. They had access to the real information.
If you
They
say
chose to
there's-
lie.
If you say there's something to be learned, regardless of whether it's true or not. I thought you were going someplace else with this. My mind wanted to. I thought you were talking about the tragedy of the fire, which, as an example, I use in The Mindful Body to show that events are not good, bad. Rather, our view of the event is what makes it good or bad. And so I had this experience. I was at a friend's house for dinner. I come back late, which never happens. And all of my neighbors were outside because my house had burned down. And, which is pretty scary. Okay. A couple of funny things happened. They said they were able to save my dogs, which that wasn't funny. That was wonderful. But they couldn't save the parrot. Well, Roger Brownlee was alive, gave me this stuffed parrot that was in a cage.
Oh my.
Okay. So
Okay. As a kid who owned parrots, I was like frightened for a
save
moment.
The parrot.
Okay.
So now I stay at a friend's house, and the next day I call the insurance company, and the person comes over, and he said this was the first time in his 20-year career that the damage was worse than the call. Most people, oh my God, it's not so bad. Here, I had already lost everything, so it didn't make sense to throw my sanity away after it. Okay, so that was the first thing. I move into the Charles Hotel, and I'm a sight to be seen with my two little dogs. And it's Christmas, then all the presents coming in, were burned, all the ones going out, It's now Christmas Eve, and I go out for dinner, and I come back to the hotel room, and it's full of gifts. Not from the owner of the hotel, not from the management, but from the so-called little people, the chambermaids, the people who park my car, the waiters and waitresses. Angela, I tell you, I could not tell that story for months, maybe years, without it bringing tears to my eyes. It was beautiful. Every Christmas, I'm reminded about what feels to me the basic goodness of people. And I couldn't tell you, except for one thing, what I lost in that fire. So,
One stuffed parrot.
No, that I don't remember that until right now. No, it was kind of fun. I was teaching, going to be teaching, as soon as school began again, a large lecture class, and all my notes were burned. So, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so what I did was I called a student who got an A in the course the year before, borrowed her notes, and omitted those and taught the course. And it was the best course I ever taught because I was not relying on anything that I would then repeat in any absolute. I was totally there for each lecture.
What do you think it is about hard events that are life-changing that anchor our mindfulness?
No, I don't think that they necessarily are. I think that, if something happens, you should take advantage of it and learn something from it. And, so there's data, not from my lab or yours, but that people who have heart attacks, when you live through a heart attack or a stroke, all of a sudden you realize, gee, this is not going to go on, forever. I've got to start living. And it's a shame. I think most people are sealed in unlived lives. And, that you need a heart attack to wake you up or somebody else's death.
My postdoc advisor, all three of my advisors died, suicide, cancer. So the joke is you don't want me to work for you. But in all seriousness, and I was very, very close with the middle one, but the last one as well. And he died of pancreatic cancer, as it were. And we did multiple Festthrifts for him, celebrations of life, right? There's like in academia, they can't get enough Festthrifts and this, and I'll never forget Ben getting up at his the celebration of life in front of all the big ups at Stanford, and all these people and editors flew in. I mean, there were like over 200 people there. President of Stanford was there, and he said, you know, if I had known that I was going to be so celebrated and that people were going to be so kind to me, I would have, you know, died a lot earlier. You know, that was the first thing he said. And the second thing he said is, you know, if I could do it over again, you know, one of these, if I could do it over again things, he said, I would have never agreed to review so many papers, review so many grants, and I would have eaten a lot more sushi and a lot more ice cream. And that was it. He had a good relationship with death. I interviewed him for hours, even before I had a podcast.
I don't think people, when people are afraid of death, I don't think it's really death that they're afraid of. They're afraid of pain.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and having no control at that moment. The old people I know, and studying this for so long, I know lots of very old people. None of them seem to be afraid of death. In fact, I ended my counterclockwise book with a conversation I was having with a friend who was 90-something. And she said, you know, Ellen, I'm not afraid of dying, but living is such fun. And I think that that's the way most of us should be. Mm-hmm. But there's something I wanted to say that we touched on before, and I don't think it's not really relevant now, but I'll find a way to make it relevant, about spontaneous remissions. Mm-hmm. You know, I said that with my mother, there was a spontaneous remission, and the medical world can't study spontaneous remissions or doesn't study, so they seem infrequent. And I think, you know, that how frequent does something have to be to give people a sense of hope that it's possible? You know, I don't think it has to be an everyday occurrence. Of course, the more frequent it is, the more likely, and then, you know, but when I think about spontaneous remissions, I personally think that they're much more common than the medical world is likely to believe. You know, once you're in a hospital, life is very different from the way your health is once you're out of the hospital. I don't mean that you're sick in one case and not sick in the other, but the attention that's given to it, the degree to which things become self-fulfilling prophecies. You know, I think that if you believe that cancer is a killer, which is what people used to believe, then I think there are many ways that the cancer becomes a death sentence. You know, that the body learns to, well, you don't, even in a very mundane way, if you think you're going to die, you don't do those things that keep you alive. You know, you're not going to go out and get exercise, for example, if you thought that was good for you. I'm going to die anyway.
The will to live is a very interesting thing. These super